14 years ago, I took a starving 7-year-old boy off the streets. At his college graduation, my wealthy family treated him like trash before a billionaire crashed the party to hand him the keys to a $12 million estate. The mogul claimed my son as his own and told him it was time to come home. My boy took those keys, turned to me, and delivered a response that made the billionaire choke on his own arrogance. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments down below. Hit the like button and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a toxic family who underestimated your worth. My name is Naomi. I am 35 years old and somehow still healing from wounds my family inflicted. As a successful software developer, I escaped their toxicity, but maintained occasional contact. Growing up in the elite circles of Atlanta, my parents demanded absolute perfection. They paraded their black excellence, while emotional coldness permeated every corner of our sprawling colonial home. I became the family scapegoat the exact moment I decided to adopt my wonderful little son, Malik. I was only 21 when I found Malik wandering near a grocery store. Instead of marrying into a political dynasty like my parents planned, I chose to become a single mother to a child they deemed broken. They never forgave me for ruining their pristine image. Last Sunday, my family invited me to what they called an upscale graduation dinner at a private Buckhead country club. I assumed they finally wanted to celebrate Malik. He had just graduated as valedictorian from Morehouse College with a dual degree in finance and computer science. I was incredibly wrong about their intentions. We sat around a massive mahogany table covered in white silk and crystal glasses. My sister Valerie sat across from me wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her husband Desmond was next to her checking his luxury watch every 2 minutes. Between sips of expensive champagne, Valerie leaned forward and smirked. She reached into her designer purse, pulled out a wrinkled $100 bill, and slid it across the table toward me. "Take this and get your charity case a cheap ride home right now," she sneered, pointing a manicured finger at my son. "Dee's hosting very important investors tonight," Valerie continued, her voice dripping with pure venom. "We do not need your street rat son ruining the aesthetic we are trying to project here. Pity goes a long way, but we have our limits." I simply sipped my sparkling water and smiled, keeping my composure completely intact. I did not flinch or raise my voice. I slowly slid the $100 bill back across the table. "Malik just graduated at the top of his class," I replied calmly. "He has every right to sit at this table and celebrate his massive achievements. The only thing ruining the aesthetic tonight is the fact that his real estate firm is 3 months behind on its mortgage," I added, watching Desmond suddenly turn extremely pale. Before Valerie could scream at me, the heavy wooden doors of the private dining room burst open. Xavier Caldwell, an infamous Atlanta billionaire and real estate mogul, strode into the room surrounded by a massive security detail. My parents, Winston and Beatrice, immediately stood up and bowed their heads in a pathetic display of submission. Xavier completely ignored them and walked straight toward the beautiful chair where Malik was sitting. Xavier looked down at my son with a mixture of pure arrogance and possession. He reached into his tailored suit pocket and dropped a heavy set of solid gold keys directly onto the table in front of Malik, a $12 million estate in Sandy Springs. He announced, his booming voice echoing through the silent room. "A $50 million trust fund is in your name. I have been watching you, boy. Graduating at the top of your class proves you are a true genius. It proves that the Caldwell bloodline flows strongly through your veins. You have shown potential. You have proven you are completely worthy of the Caldwell legacy." Xavier continued staring at Malik. "Leave this pathetic woman who picked you out of the garbage and come home where you finally belong." My mother, Beatrice, suddenly grabbed my arm, her sharp nails digging deeply into my skin. "Keep your mouth shut, Naomi," she hissed in my ear. "Xavier is planning to invest $100 million into that failing company tonight. You ruined your life 14 years ago, picking up this unwanted stray. Give the man his child back right now, or I swear you will regret it." My father, Winston, nodded vigorously in agreement. "Do not ruin this for us, Naomi," he whispered very harshly. "You have always been a massive disappointment, but today you can finally do something absolutely useful for your family. Just let the boy go." I looked at the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. They were completely willing to sell my son to a ruthless billionaire just to secure a business deal for my greedy brother-in-law. They viewed Malik not as a human being or their grandson, but as a convenient bargaining chip to save their sinking status. I turned my attention back to the table, refusing to let my family see me sweat. I had spent the last 14 years raising Malik, protecting him, loving him, and teaching him how to navigate a world that threw him away. I knew my son better than anyone else on this entire planet. The whole room held its collective breath, waiting to see what Malik would do next. Xavier stood tall and confident, expecting immediate obedience. Valerie smirked at me, clearly assuming that no young man could ever turn down a massive fortune and a spectacular mansion in Sandy Springs. Malik remained completely silent. His face was unreadable, a mask of pure calm that I had taught him to maintain during high-pressure situations. He slowly reached his hand out and picked up the gold keys from the silk tablecloth. The metal clinked loudly in the quiet room. Xavier grinned, a triumphant expression spreading across his face. My mother let out a loud sigh of deep relief while Desmond eagerly rubbed his hands together. They all thought the billionaire had won. They all thought Malik was just another greedy kid willing to abandon his mother for instant immense monetary wealth. But Malik did not stand up to hug his biological father. He did not say thank you to the man who abandoned him. Instead, my brilliant son turned his chair to face me, completely ignoring the billionaire hovering over him. "Mom," he said, his voice smooth and incredibly steady. "Is this $12 million house enough to cover the first installment of the $50 million debt his shell company currently owes your venture capital firm?" The room fell so silent you could hear a single pin drop. His triumphant grin vanished instantly, replaced by sheer absolute confusion and terror. Valerie gasped loudly, dropping her expensive wine glass right onto her designer dress. "What are you talking about?" Xavier demanded, stepping back as if he had been physically struck. "You own a venture capital firm." My mother stammered, her tight grip on my arm completely loosening. "I thought you were just a freelance software developer working out of your basement." I stood up, slowly smoothing out my skirt. I pulled a sleek black leather folder from my bag and tossed it onto the table right next to the gold keys. The heavy folder landed with a satisfying thud that echoed. "I am a software developer," I explained, my voice radiating pure, unyielding authority. "I developed proprietary cybersecurity algorithms for Onyx Zenith Capital. It just so happens that I am also the founder and majority shareholder of that exact firm. And according to the documents in this folder, Onyx Zenith Capital is the primary debt holder of your over-leveraged tech division, Mr. Caldwell." Xavier stared at the folder, his face turning an unhealthy shade of pale. "You are the silent partner," he whispered, his arrogance completely shattering into pieces. "You are the one who bought out my bad loans yesterday." "That is exactly right," I said, smiling warmly at my son, who was looking at me with immense pride. "I bought your debt because I always knew you would eventually try to crawl back into his life once Malik proved his true worth. You did not want a son savior. You just wanted a shiny new trophy to show off to your board of directors. But Malik is not a trophy, and he is not for sale." I looked around the room at my stunned family, and neither am I. "You messed with the completely wrong woman today, Mr. Caldwell." Xavier stared at the black leather folder resting on the table as if it were a venomous snake preparing to strike. His jaw remained dropped, and his arrogant smirk instantly completely vanished. He slammed his hands onto the white tablecloth, causing the crystal flutes to violently rattle. "What kind of ridiculous game are you playing here today, woman?" he demanded, his booming voice echoing off the opulent walls of the private dining room. "Now, you honestly expect me to believe that a pathetic nobody like you somehow managed to purchase the massive debt of a global real estate empire today? You are absolutely out of your mind if you think I will fall for this cheap bluff." I did not flinch at his sudden outburst. I kept my posture perfectly straight and met his furious gaze with absolute unwavering calm. "It is not a bluff, Mr. Caldwell," I replied smoothly. "My little freelance business that my family constantly mocked for the past 14 years is actually registered as Onyx Zenith Capital. We operate very quietly today. We control massive amounts of venture capital across the entire eastern seaboard. While you were busy building your flashy real estate developments and parading around Atlanta, like a king, you dangerously over-leveraged your new technology division. You took out high-risk loans from private lenders, assuming your upcoming corporate mergers would cover the massive deficits. You thought you were untouchable, but you were careless, and your financial vulnerability was completely exposed to anyone paying close attention to the market trends. You assumed those private lenders would just wait patiently for their money." I continued, my voice, slicing through the silence. but they wanted quick liquidity, and I offered them exactly what they desired. Onyx Zenith Capital bought out every single one of your high-risk tech division loans yesterday afternoon. We are now the quiet majority debt holder of your most crucial corporate sector. If I decide to call in those massive debts tomorrow morning, your entire corporate empire will instantly crumble into a pile of worthless dust. The silence in the dining room grew so suffocating that I could hear the ragged breathing of my sister Valerie. She stared at me with wide, terrified eyes, finally realizing the truth. Before Xavier could even process the devastating reality of his financial situation, my father Winston suddenly exploded with misdirected rage. He violently shoved his chair back and slammed his own fist onto the mahogany table. "Enough of these ridiculous lies, Naomi," my father shouted, his face turning a deep shade of crimson. "You forged these documents. You must have printed this garbage off the internet just to create a scene. Xavier is a legitimate billionaire with a massive global enterprise. You are nothing but an ungrateful child who wants to ruin this beautiful evening for the rest of us entirely." My mother, Beatrice, aggressively nodded along with him, her eyes darting nervously toward Xavier. "She is deeply disturbed, Mr. Caldwell." My mother pleaded frantically. "Please ignore her psychotic delusions. She is just acting out to get attention." My father pointed an accusing finger directly at my face. "You are just trying to embarrass Desmond in front of his new investor," my father yelled, spraying spit into the air. "You have always been insanely jealous of Valerie and Desmond. You could never stand the fact that they built a successful real estate firm while you were stuck raising him all alone. So, you concocted this insane fantasy about owning a venture capital firm to sabotage their massive business deal. You are a toxic, manipulative liar, and I will not let you destroy our family legacy. Hand over that fake folder right now before I call the country club security to have you forcibly removed from the premises." The sheer level of their delusion was absolutely breathtaking to witness in real time. Encouraged by my father's loud, aggressive outburst, my brother-in-law, Desmond, decided to step up and handle the situation himself. He puffed out his chest and marched forward fast. He moved directly into my personal space. His face was twisted into an ugly, threatening snarl. "You heard your father," Naomi Desmond growled, leaning down, so his face was only inches from mine. "Give me that damn folder right now. You are not going to ruin my $100 million investment deal with your psychotic little stunts. Give it to me, or I will physically take it from you." He reached his large hand out, attempting to snatch the black leather folder right off the table. He thought his physical intimidation would easily frighten me into complete submission quickly. I sidestepped his aggressive movement, effortlessly, pulling the folder out of his reach with a smooth, practiced motion. I did not retreat or show a single ounce of fear. "Do not even touch me, Desmond," I warned, my voice dropping to a dangerously low register. "I strongly suggest you back away from me right now, or I will immediately execute the default clause on the massive loan you took from Onyx Zenith Capital 6 months ago." Desmond stopped dead in his tracks, his hand freezing in midair. The angry snarl completely vanished from his face, replaced by sheer panic. His eyes darted frantically around the room, as if he was suddenly searching for an escape route. "How do you know about that loan?" he choked out, barely whispering. I smiled coldly, watching the arrogant facade melt right off his sweating face. "I know about the loan because my firm approved it," I replied loudly, ensuring that every single person in the room heard my words clearly. "You did not take out that loan to expand your real estate business, Desmond. You took it out to desperately cover up the massive embezzlement you committed just last year against them all. You stole millions from your own clients' escrow accounts to fund your gambling addiction and Valerie's lavish lifestyle. When the auditors scheduled a surprise review, you panicked and sought private funding to replace the stolen cash before anyone noticed. You thought you covered your tracks perfectly, but Onyx Zenith requires extensive forensic accounting before we approve high-risk loans. We saw every single illegal transaction you made." Desmond looked like he was about to physically vomit. He stood frozen in place, sweating profusely, his breathing shallow and rapid. Valerie let out a high-pitched shriek and grabbed her stunned husband. She demanded to know if I was telling the truth. Desmond could not even look his wife in the eye. He just stared at the floor, completely paralyzed by the realization that his entire life was effectively over. My parents watched this exchange in absolute horrified silence, finally grasping that my power was not a bluff. But instead of apologizing to me or turning their anger toward the man who actually committed major financial crimes, My parents simply stared at me with pure hatred. In their twisted minds, I was the villain for exposing the truth rather than saving them. While Desmond crumbled into a pathetic, sweating mess, Xavier Caldwell used the distraction to recover his own composure. He straightened his expensive suit jacket and let out a dark, mocking laugh. The sound was harsh and grating, cutting through the chaotic tension in the room. "You really think some paper debt scares me?" He sneered, taking a slow, deliberate step toward me. "You think buying up a few bad loans makes you my equal? I am a billionaire. I have survived market crashes, economic recessions, and corporate sabotage from people far more intelligent and ruthless than you could ever be. I have the best and most aggressive corporate lawyers in the entire state of Georgia on my payroll. They will tear your little venture capital firm into tiny, unrecognizable pieces by tomorrow morning." Xavier glared at me with absolute murderous intent, his eyes burning with toxic pride. "You want to play hardball with me, woman?" he hissed, his voice echoing dangerously. "Fine, we will play hardball. I am formally claiming my full parental rights over Malik starting right now. I do not care what kind of adoption paperwork you signed 14 years ago. I will tie you up completely today. I will bury you under litigation until your firm is bankrupt and you are living out on the streets again. And when you are completely ruined, I am finally taking my son back home with me." Xavier turned and gave a sharp nod to his massive, heavily armed security guard standing silently nearby. "Grab the boy right now," Xavier ordered loudly. Before the guards could take a single step forward, Malik moved with incredible speed, stepping directly in front of me to shield my body. He pulled out his smartphone, staring coldly at his biological father without any fear. "Take one step," Malik warned. "And the algorithm I just patented, the one your entire company's infrastructure relies on, gets open sourced to the public." The entire dining room remained completely paralyzed by my son's bold threat. Xavier Caldwell stood frozen, his eyes darting frantically between Malik and the sleek smartphone, holding the key to his entire technological infrastructure. He knew Malik was not bluffing. The absolute power in my son's voice was undeniable. Without saying another single word, I grabbed my black leather folder and walked out of that country club with my head held high, my brilliant son right by my side. We confidently left the arrogant billionaire and my toxic family drowning in the chaotic aftermath of their own massive greed. I knew they would try to retaliate because people like them cannot handle losing control, but I was completely prepared for whatever desperate moves they planned to make next. I had spent years meticulously anticipating this exact moment. I firmly refused to ever let them intimidate me ever again. They had pushed me way too far this time, and I was finally truly ready to fight back with absolutely everything I had inside me today. The retaliation came much faster than I expected. Early the very next morning, the loud, aggressive pounding on my front door echoed through my modest-looking townhouse. I was sitting at my kitchen island, drinking my morning coffee, and reviewing the global financial markets when the chaotic noise began. I did not rush to answer it. I calmly set my mug down, smoothed my comfortable clothes, and walked toward the entryway. When I opened the heavy wooden door, I found my sister Valerie and my brother-in-law Desmond standing on my porch with smug, triumphant expressions plastered across their faces. Behind them stood two local police officers, looking incredibly uncomfortable with the situation. Desmond aggressively thrust a piece of paper directly toward my face. He held a forged eviction notice, completely ignoring the fact that he was standing on my private property. "You have exactly 1 hour to pack your bags and vacate the premises." Naomi, my brother-in-law, demanded, his voice loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear. "This property is officially listed as part of the primary family estate. We filed an emergency legal motion this morning. You are being officially evicted for the financial abuse of our family and for attempting to extort a legitimate billionaire." The absolute audacity of their actions was almost comical. They had forged a legal document overnight, attempting to use the local police as their own private security force to throw me out onto the streets. Valerie crossed her arms over her expensive designer coat and let out a harsh, mocking laugh. "You always were a pathetic little parasite, Naomi," she sneered, stepping closer to the door to intimidate me. "You have been leeching off this family ever since Dad had to completely bail you out of your massive student loans. You thought you could just humiliate us last night and get away with it without any consequences. You thought you could hide behind your fake little venture capital firm and threaten my husband. Now you are going to learn what happens when you mess with the real power in this city. Get your trash out of my house right now before I have these officers physically remove you and your stray child." I looked at my sister feeling absolutely no anger, just a deep, profound sense of pity for how utterly delusional she had become. She truly believed her own lies. I stepped forward, forcing Valerie to instinctively take a step backward. "Dad did not bail me out of my student loans." "Valerie," I replied, my voice completely steady and cold. "He completely stole my dedicated college fund to pay for your lavish $200,000 wedding. I worked grueling night shifts at a dirty diner for 4 straight years just to pay for my own tuition while you were busy trying on custom designer dresses and sipping champagne. I built my entire life from the ground up while you leeched off our parents and married a man who steals from his own clients. I owe this family absolutely nothing." The 2 police officers shifted awkwardly on my front porch, clearly realizing they had been dragged into a toxic family dispute based on completely false pretenses. I did not argue with my sister or her corrupt husband anymore. I simply turned my attention directly to the commanding police officer. I reached into the console table by my front door and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I handed the officer a legally certified property deed along with a signed federal restraining order. "I do not just own this specific townhouse, officer," I explained calmly, maintaining direct eye contact. "I own this entire residential block. Furthermore, I am the primary owner of the luxury land development company that currently holds the deed to the massive McMansion where Valerie and Desmond reside." The police officer quickly scanned the certified documents, his eyes widening as he recognized the absolute legitimacy of the federal seals. He handed the papers back to me and immediately stepped away from my brother-in-law. "These documents are completely valid," the officer stated firmly, turning to face Desmond. "You are holding a falsified eviction notice, sir, which is a serious crime. I suggest you leave this property immediately before I arrest you for filing a false police report and trespassing on private property." Desmond turned completely pale, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocated fish. I looked directly at my sister, who was now shaking with visible rage and sheer panic. "You have exactly 48 hours to completely vacate my property, Valerie," I told her, my voice echoing with absolute finality. "I am executing the default clause on your luxury estate today. If you and your criminal husband are not off my land by Tuesday morning, I will have the authorities remove your designer belongings and throw them directly onto the curb." Before Valerie could even attempt to scream a response, Desmond's cell phone suddenly began ringing loudly in his pocket. He scrambled to answer it, his hands visibly trembling. When he placed the phone to his ear, I could hear the furious screaming of Xavier Caldwell radiating from the tiny speaker. The billionaire was absolutely livid. He had just discovered that Onyx Zenith Capital had officially frozen every single one of his shell accounts overnight. In direct retaliation for failing to secure, Malik Xavier had completely frozen all of my family's corporate bank accounts as his punishment. Desmond dropped his phone onto the porch grass, his entire world collapsing around him in real time. He grabbed Valerie by the arm and dragged her toward their car, leaving the forged document fluttering on the ground. My own cell phone began vibrating in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw my father, Winston, calling. I answered the call and put it on speakerphone so my sister and brother-in-law could hear their impending doom as they scrambled into their vehicle. "Naomi, you arrogant, ungrateful child," my father screamed through the phone, his voice cracking with intense desperation. "Savior, just cut off all our funding. Our accounts are completely frozen. We have no access to our money. You are completely destroying this family. You need to surrender Malik to Xavier right now. Do you hear me? Bring the boy to the corporate headquarters immediately and fix this massive mess you created before we lose everything we have ever built." I listened to my father scream and threatened me, showing absolutely zero remorse for his own actions. He was still trying to sacrifice my son to save his own wealth and social status. He cared more about maintaining his artificial image of success than he did about his own flesh and blood. "I am not destroying the family, Dad," I replied, my voice radiating pure, unyielding strength. "I am just cutting the rod out so the rest of us can finally breathe." I ended the call immediately and blocked his number without a second thought. I looked at Valerie and Desmond driving away in sheer panic one last time. 48 hours. I reminded them quietly, knowing they were already doomed. I firmly shut my heavy front door and locked it. I walked back into my kitchen, feeling a massive sense of relief wash over me. The toxic weight I had carried for years was finally gone. The silence in my home felt incredibly peaceful. but the battle was far from over. My brilliant son, Malik, walked into the kitchen holding his laptop, his face completely drained of color. He looked up at me with a grim, terrified expression that made my heart instantly drop into my stomach. "Mom," he said, his voice shaking slightly as he stared at the glowing screen in his trembling hands. Xavier did not just freeze their bank accounts to punish them. He just initiated a massive hostile takeover of my entire technology startup company. I stepped around the kitchen island to examine the laptop screen over his shoulder. Lines of malicious code and automated legal injunctions were violently flooding his administrative dashboard in real time. Xavier Caldwell was ruthlessly unleashing the full destructive power of his massive corporate machinery directly against a brilliant 21-year-old genius. Malik had meticulously built this successful technology startup from his cramped college dorm room over the last 3 grueling years. He poured his absolute heart and soul into every single line of code. Now, an arrogant, ruthless billionaire was trying to crush his incredible creation into worthless digital dust simply because his fragile ego had been severely bruised last night. Suddenly, a recorded video file unexpectedly popped up right in the center of the dark screen, completely overriding all the frantic system alerts. The video automatically played. Xavier sat proudly behind an imposing mahogany desk inside his sprawling corporate penthouse. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, and his arrogant face was twisted into a smug, condescending smile. He confidently projected the aura of a dangerous man who firmly believed he owned the entire world and everyone living inside it. "Come home right now, son Xavier," said his deep voice, oozing with completely false paternal affection. "This entire aggressive attack stops the exact second you choose to walk through the front doors of Caldwell Enterprises today. You truly belong with me, building a real financial legacy. Stay with her, and you both will inevitably burn to the ground. I will completely dismantle absolutely everything you ever created, and I will make absolutely sure your precious adopted mother loses her firm too. It is your choice, boy." The chilling video abruptly ended, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence lingering inside my kitchen. Malik slowly closed his silver laptop, his hands trembling visibly under the immense pressure. The vibrant spark of pure pride he had worn since his beautiful graduation ceremony was completely gone. He looked up at me with dark brown eyes, full of deep, agonizing guilt. "Mom, I should probably just go to him right now," Malik whispered, his voice cracking slightly with intense emotional pain. "He is going to completely destroy Onyx Zenith Capital just to get to me. You worked way too hard for 14 grueling years to carefully build your incredible firm from absolutely nothing. I simply cannot let him violently take everything you earned just because I am being foolishly stubborn today. I can easily handle his toxic abuse for a little while, until we eventually figure out a viable long-term plan." I reached out immediately and firmly grabbed both of his broad shoulders, gently forcing him to look directly into my eyes. I absolutely refused to ever let my precious son carry the heavy, toxic weight of Xavier Caldwell's incredibly massive ego. "You listen to me right now, Malik," I said, my voice radiating a fierce, unyielding maternal strength. "You are my son. I did not raise a weak coward, and I absolutely did not raise a disposable corporate pawn. I meticulously built my entire financial empire for the sole purpose of forcefully protecting you from greedy, ruthless monsters exactly like him. We do not ever run away when things get complicated, and we certainly do not surrender to wealthy bullies who throw dramatic tantrums. We confidently stand our ground, and we aggressively fight back with absolutely everything we have inside us." Malik took a deep, shaky breath and finally nodded his head. The overwhelming terror in his youthful eyes slowly transformed into a very familiar, sharp, unwavering determination. "Okay, Mom," he said quietly. "What is our next tactical move?" I immediately pulled out my secured encrypted work phone and quickly activated my vast professional underground network. Xavier arrogantly thought I was just some incredibly lucky freelancer who accidentally stumbled into purchasing his debt, but he severely underestimated my deep industry connections. As a highly paid executive corporate fixer who operated silently in the dark financial shadows, I knew exactly where all of Xavier Caldwell's dirty bodies were permanently buried. I quickly dialed the direct, secure, private line of my most trusted silent business partner, operating out of a heavily guarded skyscraper located in New York City. We had successfully dismantled hostile corporate takeovers for major international tech giants before, and violently dealing with an amateur like Xavier was really just another typical day at the office. I desperately need you to initiate a total emergency server migration for Malik's startup. Immediately, I instructed speaking very rapidly, instantly rewrote his entire sensitive data infrastructure directly through our hidden ghost servers, operating in Switzerland, and establish a Tier 1 biometric defense firewall, quickly lock out all external administrative access, and aggressively counter their pending legal injunctions with a massive federal intellectual property block. My trusted partner did not ask a single unnecessary question regarding my demanding request. Within exactly 15 short minutes, the massive aggressive cyber attack on Malik's vulnerable company hit a solid, impenetrable digital brick wall. Xavier's expensive corporate hackers were completely locked out, and his hostile takeover attempt was instantly paralyzed by our far superior federal countermeasures. Malik watched his laptop screen with wide, amazed eyes as his entire life's work was securely locked safely behind military-grade encryption protocols. We decisively won the first major digital battle today, but I fully knew a ruthless, relentless billionaire exactly like Xavier would never quietly accept an embarrassing defeat. If he could not successfully conquer us using his overwhelming corporate power, he would inevitably try to forcefully use something much more sinister and emotionally manipulative against us. Exactly 2 agonizing hours later, my personal cell phone began ringing loudly, abruptly, displaying my mother, Beatrix's private contact information. I had permanently blocked my toxic father, but my desperate mother intentionally used a completely different emergency phone number just to bypass my strict communication restrictions. I answered the sudden call very cautiously, fully expecting another vicious barrage of cruel insults and meaningless empty threats from her. Instead, I shockingly heard my elderly mother weeping hysterically and uncontrollably on the other end of the unstable, static-filled line. "Naomi, please. You absolutely have to send Malik to Atlanta General Hospital immediately." My mother sobbed, her breathing incredibly ragged and deeply desperate. "Your father just suddenly collapsed on the floor. He suffered a massive, devastating heart attack from all the severe, immense emotional stress we experienced this horrible morning. The professional doctors here sternly say he might not actually survive through the long, cold night." Hai is weakly begging to see his only beloved grandson one last time before he permanently tragically passes away. "Please do not selfishly let your dying father depart this earth, carrying this incredibly heavy, unbearable burden of deep, sorrowful regret. Please send Malik over to say a proper, respectful goodbye right now." The sheer, intense panic echoing in her shaking voice sounded incredibly, remarkably genuine. Even after all the horrifically cruel, abusive things my terrible parents had done to us, Malik still miraculously possessed a very kind, incredibly forgiving, pure heart. When I solemnly relayed the tragic medical message to him, he firmly insisted on going directly to the busy hospital to pay his final personal respects. I was still deeply intensely engaged in heavily securing the final impenetrable legal blocks against Xavier's aggressive corporate lawyers, so I could not safely leave my secure computer terminal just yet. I reluctantly, hesitantly agreed to let Malik bravely drive himself over to the large medical facility alone, but I strictly made him seriously promise to call me the exact second he safely arrived. I should have honestly known much better than to ever blindly trust a single solitary falling tear my deceptive, manipulative mother ever shed. When my son Malik nervously arrived at the highly restricted VIP floor of Atlanta General Hospital, he quickly realized something was entirely wrong. There were no rushing doctors or beeping medical monitors echoing in the quiet hallway. He slowly walked into the sterile hospital room and found my father Winston sitting perfectly upright in a comfortable leather chair, casually drinking a cup of premium black coffee. My mother, Beatrix, stood right beside him, wearing a smug, satisfied, evil smile on her face. The supposed life-threatening medical emergency was a complete total fabrication. It was a vile, manipulative trap deliberately designed to cleverly lure my son away from my strong maternal protection. Xavier Caldwell suddenly stepped out from the creeping dark shadows of the spacious hospital room, flanked by 2 massive, heavily armed security guards, wearing matching dark suits. Sitting silently at a small metal table in the far corner was a corrupt private judge that Xavier permanently kept on his extensive corporate payroll. The compromised judge had several thick, intimidating legal documents spread widely across the polished table surface. The judge aggressively pushed a shiny, solid gold pen directly toward my terrified son. "You are going to permanently sign a formal DNA acknowledgement confirming my biological paternity today." Xavier ordered, his voice echoing with sinister, overwhelming triumph. You will also immediately sign an ironclad non-disclosure agreement, legally binding you to my corporation. If you stubbornly refuse, my private judge will legally strip away absolutely everything you currently own forever. He will completely obliterate your entire future. Just as the corrupt judge severely pressured Malik to pick up the pen and sign the fraudulent papers, I confidently walked right into the hostel room, accompanied by 4 towering armed federal marshals. Nobody is signing anything today, I announced sharply. In fact, Mr. Caldwell, we are here to serve you. The 4 federal marshals fanned out across the hospital room, instantly shifting the balance of power. The corrupt private judge visibly palled and dropped his gold pen. He recognized those badges and knew his lucrative under-the-table career was over. One marshal stepped up to the billionaire and shoved a stack of documents against his chest. You have been served, Mr. Caldwell. The marshal stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Xavier snatched the paperwork, his eyes darting across the federal subpoenas. He let out a harsh laugh, attempting to maintain his facade of invincibility. You honestly think paper is going to stop me from taking my boy Xavier? Sneered, stepping toward me. You are completely out of your depth, Naomi. I practically own the federal courts in Georgia. I have bought half the judges sitting on the bench today. I will have this ridiculous subpoena thrown out before dinner. I smiled, radiating pure confidence. I walked past him, placing myself fiercely in front of Malik. You need to start doing better background checks on your adversaries. Xavier, I replied, my voice echoing with terrifying calmness. You might arrogantly think you own those federal judges, but you have absolutely no idea who actually controls their money. My firm, Onyx Zenith Capital, does not just handle venture debt. The freelance business you and my family constantly mocked happens to be the primary institutional manager for the federal judicial pension fund of this entire district. I literally control their retirement accounts. If they even think about accepting a bribe from you to throw out this subpoena, I will trigger an audit that freezes their lucrative pensions for the next decade. The corrupt private judge let out a terrified gasp, hastily packing his briefcase. He scrambled out of the hospital room without looking back, completely abandoning his wealthy benefactor. Xavier stood frozen, his arrogant smirk evaporating into pure panic. He realized I had systematically dismantled his entire legal safety net before he even knew we were actively at war. But Xavier Caldwell was a ruthless predator, and predators always attack when cornered. He glared at me, his eyes burning with intense hatred. It does not matter who manages their pensions, he growled, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. I have the ultimate legal trump card. DNA is absolutely all that matters in the strict eyes of the law. I am his biological father. The Caldwell blood runs strongly through his veins, and no court will ever deny a wealthy, successful father his rightful heir. Malik belongs to me. I felt a massive surge of protective maternal rage boiling in my chest. I looked at this cruel monster who dared claim ownership over the brilliant young man I raised. You did not just lose Malik 14 years ago, Xavier. I said, my words slicing through the tense air like a blade. You did not simply misplace him or suffer some tragic accidental separation. You forcefully threw a screaming, terrified 7-year-old boy out of a moving vehicle in the middle of a freezing winter night. Malik stiffened behind me, letting out a sharp, heavy breath. My mother, Beatrice, and my father. Winston gasped loudly, their eyes darting rapidly between me and Xavier. I reached into my bag and pulled out a certified copy of a heavily redacted police report, tossing it directly at Xavier's expensive shoes. His biological mother was not some wealthy, elite socialite. I continued raising my voice so every single person heard the ugly truth. She was a hard-working hotel maid you had a secret affair with. When she threatened to expose your hidden child and ruin your impending marriage to a politician's daughter, you decided to permanently erase the problem. You paid off the local police department to bury the incident and left a terrified little boy to starve on the cold streets of Atlanta. Xavier stared at the floor, unable to formulate a single lie to counter the absolute, undeniable truth. The federal marshals watched him with deep, visible disgust. I turned to look at my parents, fully expecting them to finally realize the horrifying extent of the monster they were supporting. I expected them to protect their grandson. I was wrong. My mother, Beatrice, aggressively stepped forward, completely ignoring the terrifying revelation about my son's highly traumatic past. So what? Naomi, my mother, shouted, her face twisted with greedy, unyielding desperation. He is a powerful billionaire now. People make silly mistakes when they are young and ambitious. Xavier is generously offering Malik a $50 million trust fund and a secure place in a massive corporate empire. Malik should be incredibly grateful that a man of this stature is willing to legally claim him today. You are just trying to ruin this incredible opportunity because you are a bitter, barren woman who could not have her own kids. The sheer level of her toxic cruelty was absolutely breathtaking. She was perfectly willing to hand my son over to the man who tried to end his life just to secure her own social status. My father, Winston, nodded in agreement, glaring at me with pure disgust. You are completely destroying our family legacy because you are intensely jealous, Naomi, he spat. You adopted this boy because no wealthy man ever wanted to give you a real family. Now you are maliciously stealing his only chance at true greatness. I looked at the woman who gave birth to me and felt absolutely nothing. The long, painful decades of seeking her basic approval, trying to be the perfect daughter, enduring her endless emotional abuse, finally vanished into thin air. I looked at my mother with absolute freezing ice in my eyes. I am not barren, mother, I replied, my voice perfectly steady and devoid of any sorrow. I am perfectly capable of having biological children. I simply chose not to pass on your highly toxic, abusive DNA. Beatrice recoiled as if I had physically struck her across the face. She grabbed her chest, her fake pearls rattling loudly. I reached into my bag one last time and pulled out 2 thick legal envelopes, handing one directly to my mother and one to my father. Since we are putting all our dark secrets on the table today, here is my final gift to you both, I announced coldly. Those are formal legal notices officially severing all financial ties between us. My father ripped open the envelope, his eyes scanning the dense documents. His face instantly drained of all natural color. What is this? He demanded, his voice trembling with sudden sheer terror. I smiled coldly. You and Mom love to brag to your high society friends about your incredible generational wealth and massive real estate investments, but the absolute truth is you have been completely broke for the last 6 years. You took out massive secret loans to keep up your fake black excellence aesthetic. You confidently thought you were borrowing from a nameless private equity firm. I took a slow, deliberate step toward my deeply horrified parents. But you were actually borrowing from Onyx Zenith Capital, I whispered, watching their entire world shatter into jagged pieces. I personally approved every single loan you took. I funded your luxury cars, your country club memberships, and your extravagant vacations. I essentially bankrolled your entire fake lifestyle, and as of this exact moment, I am officially calling in every single one of those massive loans. You have exactly 30 days to repay me in full, or I will legally seize absolutely everything you own. You will be destitute. Beatrice let out a loud, dramatic wail, collapsing heavily into the hospital chair. Winston dropped the legal papers, his aging hands shaking violently. They finally realized that the daughter they had abused and discarded was actually the only reason they had not been living on the streets. I turned my back on them, completely ignoring their pathetic pleas for financial mercy. I looked at Malik, who was standing tall and proud, his eyes fixed on me with deep, unwavering respect. Let us go home, son, I said softly. We walked out of the room, flanked by marshals, leaving Xavier Caldwell and my toxic parents drowning in the ruin of their own making. But the chaotic war was far from over. My sister Valerie had not been present in the hospital room, but she quickly received frantic, panicked phone calls from our terrified parents. Desmond had already informed her that they were losing their massive mansion, and now she realized the entire family fortune was completely, instantly vanishing. Valerie was intensely enraged by the impending total loss of her unearned lavish wealth. She knew she could not fight me in a legitimate courtroom or an actual corporate boardroom. So, she decided to attack me in the only arena she truly understood. Valerie drove her luxury vehicle directly to the downtown studio of a highly popular, controversial Atlanta gossip blog known for destroying reputations across the city. She barged into the studio, demanding an immediate live interview with the eager hosts. As the camera red light blinked on, Valerie began to violently sob, producing fake, hysterical tears for thousands of live viewers. She stared directly into the camera lens and began spinning a dangerous web of malicious lies. My sister Naomi is a dangerous psychopathic criminal, Valerie cried, her voice echoing across the internet. She completely manipulated our entire family, and now she has violently kidnapped my poor innocent nephew, Malik. She is holding him hostage, demanding ransom money from his biological father. She is trying to steal everything from us, and somebody needs to stop her right now. The live broadcast instantly caught fire across every major social media platform in Atlanta. Valerie had meticulously positioned herself in front of a neutral backdrop, wearing minimal makeup to falsely project the image of a deeply traumatized victim. Her theatrical performance was terrifyingly effective. Thousands of comments flooded the live chat room within seconds, mostly filled with outraged viewers demanding immediate justice for my supposedly captive son. Prominent figures within the elite circles of the city began sharing the viral video, expressing their utter shock and absolute disgust at my alleged criminal actions. My secure, encrypted work phone began ringing incessantly almost immediately after her malicious broadcast concluded. Several of my high-profile venture capital clients were calling in a state of sheer panic, demanding urgent reassurances regarding the absolute safety of their massive investments. They were incredibly nervous about the sudden explosive public scandal, threatening to envelop Onyx Zenith Capital. My own mother, Beatrice, had even shared the ridiculous video link on her personal timeline, adding a lengthy dramatic caption about how she had entirely failed to protect her precious family from my supposed toxic darkness. They were coordinating a massive coordinated smear campaign designed to completely obliterate my hard-earned professional reputation and force me into total submission. They wanted me terrified. They wanted me begging for mercy. But they fundamentally misunderstood the fierce woman I had become. I did not sit in my office crying over their vicious lies or worrying about the fragile opinions of internet strangers. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and calmly watched the chaotic digital storm unfold with absolute analytical precision. I knew that every single lie Valerie told on that public broadcast was just another heavy nail in her own permanent coffin. Her desperate public performance was merely a loud smoke-oaksy screen designed to hide their true sinister intentions today. While Valerie aggressively waged her vicious public relations war against my pristine character, her corrupt husband Desmond was secretly executing the second phase of their desperate scheme. He foolishly assumed that the massive public distraction caused by his wife's viral video would leave my company's servers completely unguarded. Sitting in his dark home office, Desmond frantically attempted to siphon millions of dollars directly from the primary reserve accounts of Onyx Zenith Capital. Han utilized a series of extremely old legacy family access codes that my father had retained from an outdated joint business venture many years ago. Desmond desperately believed he was being incredibly stealthy, but he severely underestimated the sheer power of my proprietary cybersecurity network. My digital defense systems immediately flagged his unauthorized intrusion attempt the exact second he typed in the first fraudulent password. I sat at my home terminal watching his pathetic digital movements in real time. I allowed him to temporarily bypass the outer firewall purely to gather irrefutable digital evidence of his federal cyber crimes. Once he attempted to initiate the massive wire transfer to his offshore accounts, I instantly triggered a catastrophic system lockdown. Desmond's computer screen went entirely black, permanently bricking his expensive hardware and immediately sending his precise geographical coordinates straight to my private security team. He was foolishly playing checkers while I was actively commanding a highly sophisticated game of four-dimensional chess. With Desmond's illicit activity now perfectly documented and safely secured, I finally turned my full, undivided attention back to my treacherous sister. I knew a standard corporate press release would never effectively combat the severe damage Valerie was currently inflicting upon my hard-earned professional reputation. I needed to confront her malicious lies directly and aggressively on her own chosen battlefield. Valerie had quickly booked a highly publicized follow-up interview on the most popular aggressive urban gossip podcast in the entire state. She planned to spend another 2 hours crying on a live microphone, further assassinating my character to a massive audience of millions. I did not bother calling my public relations department or drafting a polite legal cease and desist letter. I put on my sharpest tailored suit, grabbed my leather briefcase, and drove my car directly to the downtown broadcasting studio. The heavily guarded facility was supposedly completely impenetrable to uninvited guests. However, the studio owner happened to be a prominent real estate developer whose largest commercial loan was currently quietly held by Onyx Zenith Capital. When I confidently walked through the front doors, the massive security guards immediately stepped aside, clearing a direct path for me without asking a single solitary question. They recognized real power when it walked into their lobby, and they knew better than to impede my relentless momentum. I smoothly bypassed the crowded waiting area, completely ignoring the frantic receptionists who scrambled to figure out how I had gained internal access so effortlessly. I approached the main recording booth just as the bright red recording sign flashed overhead, indicating the show was currently broadcasting live to the masses. Through the thick glass partition, I could clearly see Valerie wiping away fake tears with an expensive designer tissue while recounting a completely fabricated story about my supposed youthful jealousy. I pushed open the heavy soundproof studio doors right in the middle of Valerie's dramatic, tear-filled monologue. The popular podcast host, a man known for his aggressive, investigative style, froze mid-sentence as I calmly walked directly onto his live broadcasting set. Valerie let out a genuine gasp of pure terror, her fake tears instantly drying up the second she saw my face. I completely ignored my trembling sister and pulled up an extra leather chair, sitting down right across the glass desk from the utterly stunned host. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a sleek silver USB drive, smoothly sliding it across the polished desk toward the host. I strongly suggest you plug that drive into your broadcasting system and play the audio file right now. I instructed, my voice radiating absolute chilling authority. The host, sensing a massive viral moment, eagerly grabbed the drive and plugged it directly into his main soundboard. A crystal clearer audio recording instantly echoed through the high-end studio monitors, broadcasting live to millions of eagerly listening viewers. It was a recorded phone conversation between Valerie and Desmond from just 3 short days ago in the crisp, unedited recording. Valerie's sharp, arrogant voice rang out perfectly clearly for the entire world to hear. "We just need to completely frame Naomi for the corporate fraud," Valerie said on the tape, her tone shockingly cold and calculating. "If we successfully convince Xavier that she is ruthlessly holding the boy hostage for a massive ransom," snorts, "he will easily blindly pay us the $10 million we desperately urgently need." Desmond's panicked, frantic voice answered her immediately. "We absolutely have to get that money today, Valerie. The dangerous, unforgiving loan sharks we owe our massive secret gambling debts to are explicitly threatening to violently break my legs by Friday afternoon. We will just heavily use the fake dramatic eviction controversy to safely distract her while I successfully hack directly into her private firm." The live broadcast chat displayed on the studio monitor completely exploded with thousands of absolutely shocked comments, moving way too fast to physically read. The popular podcast host stared at Valerie with his jaw literally hanging wide open in complete, unadulterated disbelief. He had just inadvertently broadcasted a massive, stunning criminal confession to his massive global audience. Valerie screamed in pure, unadulterated, overwhelming panic, realizing her entire perfect fake life was utterly destroyed forever. She violently lunged across the glass desk, frantically attempting to completely smash the expensive microphone into tiny pieces to desperately stop the damning broadcast. I easily caught her flailing wrist midair with one swift, effortless motion, stopping her dead in her tracks. I simply leaned forward, looking directly deep into her wide, wildly terrified eyes. I smiled a chilling, victorious, predatory smile that perfectly communicated my absolute total control over the entire escalating situation. "Check your phone right now, Valerie," I whispered coldly into the remaining live microphone, ensuring every single listener heard my final devastating words. "The IRS just officially completely froze your luxury boutique's bank accounts for massive federal tax evasion." Valerie collapsed backward into her chair as if the air had been violently stolen from her lungs. She stared blankly at the glowing screen of her mobile device, currently vibrating uncontrollably on the desk. A bright red urgent alert from her primary banking institution was prominently displayed, confirming her total, irreversible financial ruin. The podcast studio remained completely dead silent, except for her heavy, jagged breathing echoing over the live audio feed. "You honestly believed you could publicly humiliate me and effortlessly escape unharmed," I said, standing up gracefully from the studio chair. "You played a very dangerous game today, sister, and you just lost absolutely everything." I adjusted my sharp-tailored suit jacket, ignoring the utterly speechless host, and walked out of the broadcasting room. I left Valerie weeping loudly into the open microphone. As I left Valerie crying into an open microphone, the reality of her financial ruin was settling over her husband. Desmond sat alone in the dark bar of an upscale Atlanta hotel, staring into warm bourbon. He was completely trapped. The IRS froze Valerie boutique accounts, and my digital lockdown secured proof of his corporate theft. Desmond faced decades in federal prison for tax evasion and embezzlement. His loan shark circled demanding immediate repayment for extensive gambling debts. Desperation makes greedy men dangerous. With nowhere else to turn, Desmond frantically dialed the only man who hated me as much as he did. Xavier Caldwell agreed to meet him in the VIP lounge of his flagship hotel. Desmond scrambled into the dimly lit room, sweating through his expensive suit. He threw away any remaining pride and begged the billionaire for an emergency financial bailout. Xavier sat back in his velvet chair, swirling his scotch with a calculating expression. Xavier did not care about Desmond or his gambling debts, but he saw a useful pawn. Heirs. Xavier proposed a Hyliline heirs. If Desmond planted falsified financial documents inside my private office at Onyx Zenith Capital, Xavier could claim I committed corporate espionage against his technology division. This fabricated evidence would give Xavier's legal team the exact federal grounds needed to seize my firm and force me to hand over Malik. In exchange for executing this crime, Xavier promised to wipe out Desmond's debts and permanently relocate him and Valerie away from the IRS. Desmond greedily accepted the sinister deal without a second of hesitation. He foolishly believed his outdated corporate connections would allow him to outsmart me. Using ties with a corrupt security contractor who serviced the building, Desmond acquired a cloned keycard. He planned his midnight break in assuming my digital defenses were solely focused on external firewalls. At 2 inches the morning, Desmond slipped through the underground parking garage of my office building. He crept past the overnight security guards, moving like a desperate thief through the shadows. He navigated the sleek hallways of Onyx Zenith Capital, his heart pounding. He carried a heavy manila-forged documents meticulously prepared by Xavier's legal team. Desmond finally reached my executive corner office. He swiped the cloned keycard and the glass door clicked open. He let out a sigh of relief, believing the hardest part of his criminal mission was already over. He quickly located my heavy steel floor safe, hidden discreetly behind a modern abstract painting. Desmond spent hours watching online tutorials on how to easily bypass commercial locking mechanisms. He pulled out an electronic scrambling device and attached it to the digital keypad. After a few tense minutes, the heavy steel door of my private safe popped open. Desmond eagerly shoved the manila folder deep inside the secure compartment, slamming the heavy door shut and wiping his fingerprints off the metal surface. He confidently sneaked out of the building, convinced he had just secured his financial freedom and successfully engineered my permanent downfall. The next morning, the Atlanta sun rose brightly over the city skyline. Desmond and Xavier sat inside a heavily tinted luxury limousine parked right across the street from Onyx Zenith Capital. They were sipping premium vintage champagne and celebrating their supposed massive victory. Xavier had anonymously tipped off the FBI just before dawn, claiming a credible whistleblower had provided undeniable proof of my corporate espionage. At precise 9:04, dark federal vehicles swerved into the loading zone of my building. A dozen heavily armed federal agents wearing tactical jackets marched through the revolving glass doors. Inside the limousine, Desmond chuckled darkly, taking another gulp of his expensive champagne. "Look at them go!" Desmond gloated, his face flushed with excitement. "They are going to drag Naomi out of there in tight metal handcuffs. She's going to lose everything she built, and she will finally learn her proper place." Xavier smiled, leaning back against the plush leather seats. "And by noon today, Malik will be standing in my corporate office, begging me for legal assistance," Xavier replied, radiating toxic pride. "I will crush her firm and seamlessly absorb her entire portfolio before the stock market even closes today." "We have one, Desmond. You managed to do something highly useful for once in your pathetic life." They clinked their crystal glasses together, eagerly waiting for the deeply satisfying sight of my public arrest. 5 minutes passed, then 10 minutes. The heavy glass doors of my building finally slid open, but the scene that unfolded was different than what the two arrogant men had confidently envisioned. The federal agents marched out of the lobby perfectly in formation, but they were not escorting me. They walked straight past my building and marched across the busy downtown street, heading directly toward the tinted limousine. Desmond dropped his crystal champagne flute, spilling expensive alcohol over his tailored pants. Before Xavier could order his driver to speed away, the federal agents aggressively surrounded the luxury vehicle. The lead agent forcefully yanked the passenger door open, grabbing a terrified Desmond by the lapels of his suit. Desmond let out a shriek of pure panic as the strong agents dragged him out of the plush vehicle and slammed him aggressively against the dark-tinted window. They secured tight metal handcuffs around his shaking wrists, reading him his federal Miranda rights loudly over the noisy morning traffic. Xavier sat frozen in his seat, his arrogant confidence shattering as he watched his pathetic pawn get violently subdued. I calmly walked out of the revolving glass doors of my building, holding a sleek silver tablet in my hand. I crossed the street, my expensive heels clicking sharply against the pavement until I stood directly in front of my hyperventilating brother-in-law. Desmond was openly weeping, now his face pressed against the cold glass of the limousine. Did you really think the owner of a cybersecurity-focused venture capital firm would not have biometric scanners monitoring her own private safe? I asked, my voice projecting chilling authority. You foolishly bypassed the primary keypad, but you failed to notice the microscopic retinal and thermal sensors embedded directly inside the steel doorframe. The exact second you improperly opened that compartment, my internal defense system triggered a massive federal alert. I held up my sleek silver tablet, turning the screen so Desmond and Xavier could see the crystal-clear night vision footage. You just gave the FBI a high-definition video of yourself committing major federal tampering and breaking into a secured financial institution. I explained you also left your DNA all over the forged documents you clumsily shoved inside. You are looking at 20 years in a federal penitentiary. Desmond violently thrashed against the strong federal agents, screaming frantically toward the open door of the limousine. Xavier, you have to help me. Desmond shrieked, his voice cracking with intense sheer terror. You promised you would wipe out my massive debts. You promised to protect me. Tell them you ordered me to do this. Tell them the actual truth right now. Xavier looked at the pathetic, weeping man in absolute deep disgust. He recognized that Desmond was now a massive, severe legal liability who could effortlessly drag his entire global empire down into the mud. Xavier did not hesitate for a single solitary second. He coldly reached out and violently slammed the heavy limousine door, completely shutting Desmond out. Lock the doors and drive away immediately. Xavier barked aggressively at his terrified driver, entirely abandoning his desperate brother-in-law to the federal authorities. The long, dark limousine rapidly screeched away from the curb, burning heavy rubber as it recklessly sped down the busy Atlanta street, leaving Desmond wailing hysterically on the hard concrete pavement. Xavier took a deep, shaky breath, leaning back against his luxurious leather seat, trying to rapidly calculate his next aggressive legal maneuver to distance himself from the arrested man. But as the dark vehicle wildly sped down the highway, Xavier's private encrypted cell phone suddenly began ringing loudly inside his tailored jacket pocket. He angrily snatched the phone, expecting a frantic call from his expensive corporate lawyers. Instead, he saw my son Malik's name flashing brightly across the screen. Xavier eagerly answered the call, falsely assuming his biological son was finally surrendering to his immense wealth. I am so glad you finally came to your absolute senses, boy, Xavier said, his voice shaking with residual adrenaline and profound relief. I wouldn't go back to your corporate headquarters if I were you, Mr. Caldwell, Malik replied smoothly, his voice echoing with the exact same terrifying, ice-cold confidence I had instilled in him. We just initiated the final phase of our operation today. You are going to permanently lose every single thing you possess right now. Your time is officially completely up forever. The chilling phone call from Malik echoed loudly inside the luxurious cabin of the speeding limousine. Xavier Caldwell felt a cold, paralyzing dread wash over his entire body. He aggressively slammed his fist against the privacy partition, shouting frantic orders at his terrified driver to immediately change course. They raced through the congested streets of downtown Atlanta, running multiple red lights to reach the towering glass skyscraper that served as the global headquarters of Caldwell Enterprises. Xavier burst out of the vehicle before it even came to a complete stop, entirely abandoning his usual composed public demeanor. He sprinted through the expansive marble lobby, completely ignoring the confused greetings from his elite security team and front desk staff. He aggressively swiped his executive access card and stepped into the private express elevator, hitting the top floor button with trembling fingers. He firmly believed he could still somehow salvage this rapidly deteriorating situation by utilizing his immense wealth and deeply rooted corporate influence. I thought he could easily walk into his own building and quickly reassert absolute dominance over a 21-year-old college graduate. The heavy silver elevator doors finally slid open on the top executive floor. Xavier charged down the pristine glass hallway and violently pushed open the massive double doors of his private executive boardroom, expecting to find empty chairs and quiet submission. Instead, he walked into his absolute worst nightmare, The massive room was fully occupied. His entire powerful board of directors sat around the expansive mahogany table, trapped in a state of sheer, absolute, horrified silence. Nobody looked up to greet their billionaire founder. All their terrified eyes were completely glued to the massive digital projection screen dominating the far wall of the sleek boardroom. Standing proudly at the head of the long table, commanding the entire room with effortless, undeniable authority, was my brilliant son, Malik. He wore a sharp-tailored suit looking like a true financial titan. He was calmly manipulating a glowing silver tablet, wirelessly projecting a complex, massive web of cascading data directly onto the wall. Bright red lines rapidly connected hundreds of hidden offshore shell companies directly back to the primary accounts of Caldwell Enterprises. Xavier froze in the doorway, his heart pounding frantically against his ribs. "What exactly is going on in my boardroom?" Xavier demanded, his voice shaking with a pathetic mixture of outrage and sheer undeniable panic. "Turn that projector off right now, and get out of my building, boy." None of the board members even moved a single muscle. Malik slowly turned his head to look at his biological father, projecting the exact same freezing, icy composure I had meticulously taught him over the past 14 years. "I am simply providing your esteemed board of directors with a comprehensive, real-time forensic audit," Mr. Caldwell Malik replied, his voice completely steady and radiating pure, lethal confidence. "My proprietary algorithm successfully bypassed your outdated corporate firewalls over an hour ago. It systematically traced every single one of your carefully hidden financial transactions spanning the last 2 decades. You thought you were incredibly clever, burying your illegal activities behind dozens of fake LLCs and offshore trusts. But data never actually lies, and code never forgets." Malik tapped the screen of his silver tablet, and the massive digital map shifted rapidly, zooming in on specific neighborhoods across the city of Atlanta. The board members visibly flinched as the undeniable proof of their founder's massive criminal enterprise was laid completely bare. "Over the past 20 years, you deliberately engineered a highly sophisticated system of illegal redlining, predatory lending, and fraudulent evictions, entirely targeting marginalized minority communities across this city." Malik explained, his voice ringing with absolute righteous fury. "You ruthlessly stole homes from hardworking families and manipulated zoning laws to artificially inflate your own real estate portfolio. You built your billion-dollar empire on the broken backs of the exact same communities you publicly claimed to support. And you used your shell companies to systematically launder the stolen profits directly into your primary personal accounts." The chairman of the board, a wealthy, prominent investor who had backed Xavier for decades, finally spoke up, his voice trembling with pure terror. "Is this data entirely accurate, Malik? Can you undeniably prove these severe allegations in a federal court of law today?" Malik nodded slowly, swiping his tablet to display hundreds of highly classified internal bank transfers matching the exact dates of the illegal evictions. "Every single byte of this data is completely irrefutable," Malik stated firmly. "The algorithm cross-referenced your private financial records with public housing data and hidden offshore tax havens. It clearly proves a massive coordinated racketeering conspiracy led directly by Xavier Caldwell. The federal authorities will have an absolute field day dissecting this criminal enterprise." Xavier realized his empire was violently collapsing into digital dust. Right before his very eyes, the board members were already frantically texting their private defense attorneys, desperately trying to legally distance themselves from the impending catastrophic federal fallout. Xavier knew he could not possibly intimidate his way out of this devastating situation, so he foolishly decided to play his final desperate emotional card. He slowly walked toward Malik, raising his hands in a pathetic gesture of fake paternal surrender. He forced his facial features into a mask of deep manufactured sorrow, hoping to manipulate the kind heart of the boy he had violently discarded so many years ago. "Malik, please listen to me right now," Xavier pleaded, his voice dripping with toxic artificial warmth. "You are incredibly brilliant. You have clearly inherited my exact genius and my unmatched aggressive business acumen. You just proved you are the smartest person in this entire building today. We do not have to fight each other like this, son. You and I are the exact same blood. We are true family. If you just delete this data right now and stop this digital attack, I will instantly step down. I will immediately name you the sole CEO of Caldwell Enterprises today. You can have the massive corner office, the private jets, the $50 million trust fund, and the complete unquestioned control of this global empire. Just come home to your real father." The boardroom remained completely silent, waiting to see if the young man would accept the ultimate corporate bribe. Malik looked at the desperate, sweating billionaire with an expression of pure, absolute disgust. The offer of immense wealth meant absolutely nothing to a boy who had learned the true inherent value of genuine unconditional love. "A father protects you," Malik said, his voice echoing with devastating finality. "A father sacrifices his own comfort to make sure his child is safe and warm. You violently threw me out of a moving car into the freezing night because my existence threatened your fake social climbing marriage. You threw me away like I was nothing but garbage." Malik took a slow, deliberate step toward the shattered billionaire. "A mother builds you." Malik continued radiating pure, unyielding power. "A mother works grueling hours to feed you and educates you to become a king. Naomi built me. She gave me a real home when I was sleeping on cold concrete. She is my only true family. I am not here today to take your job, Mr. Caldwell. I am here to completely liquidate it." Before Xavier could formulate a pathetic response, the heavy boardroom doors violently swung open again. My mother, Beatrice, and my father, Winston, aggressively burst into the executive room, looking completely disheveled and entirely unhinged. They had frantically rushed over from their sprawling mansion after discovering that all their credit cards and bank accounts had been permanently frozen by my earlier actions. They desperately needed Xavier's money to maintain their fraudulent lifestyle, and they were entirely willing to destroy their own grandson to secure it. "Xavier, please, you have to listen to us," Winston screamed completely, ignoring the severe tension in the room and the horrified stares of the board members. "Naomi is acting entirely on her own. We have absolutely nothing to do with this vicious corporate attack. Please do not cut off our funding today. We will do whatever you want us to do." Beatrice aggressively marched right up to Malik, grabbing his tailored suit jacket with her sharp, manicured claws. She completely ignored the massive digital map displaying his incredible triumph. She only saw a major obstacle standing in the way of her luxury shopping sprees. "You ungrateful little brat," Beatrice hissed, shaking Malik by the lapels. "Xavier is offering you the entire world today. Hand over that data to him right now and stop this ridiculous temper tantrum. Do you have any idea how much money we are going to lose if you ruin this business deal? Stop being so incredibly selfish and give your father exactly what he wants right now before you completely destroy our entire family legacy." Malik gently but firmly removed my mother's hands from his suit jacket, brushing the fabric off with a look of pure pity. He did not even bother to answer her toxic demands. He simply looked toward the open boardroom doors, waiting for the final devastating blow to be delivered. I smoothly walked into the executive boardroom wearing a sharp, crimson, tailored suit radiating absolute, undeniable dominance. I was flanked by 4 powerful, prominent executives whom Xavier recognized instantly. They were the active board of directors from his largest, most aggressive rival real estate conglomerate in the entire country. The air in the room grew completely freezing cold as I confidently stepped up beside my brilliant son, placing a supportive hand on his broad shoulder. Beatrice and Winston stumbled backward, their faces turning totally pale as they finally realized the massive scale of my ultimate retaliation. Xavier let out a shaky, terrified breath, staring at his worst corporate enemies standing triumphantly inside his own private headquarters. I looked directly into my father's terrified eyes and smiled a beautifully ruthless smile. "He does not have the data anymore, Dad." I announced, my voice echoing perfectly through the silent, devastated boardroom. "I do, and I just sold it to his biggest competitor." Xavier violently collapsed into the nearest leather chair, utterly destroyed. My brilliant son and I had finally permanently conquered their entire toxic empire. The crushing reality of my absolute victory hung heavily in the freezing air of the executive boardroom. Xavier Caldwell slumped forward in his expensive leather chair, his face buried in his trembling hands. The powerful billionaire who had arrogantly crashed my son's graduation dinner just a few short weeks ago was now nothing but a defeated, broken man. The rival board members I brought with me immediately stepped forward, handing Xavier a thick stack of binding legal documents. They formally notified him that his massive corporate empire was being completely dismantled and aggressively absorbed by his greatest competitors. My father Winston frantically grabbed my arm, his eyes wide with sheer, unadulterated panic. "Naomi, please, you cannot actually do this to your own flesh and blood," Winston begged, his voice cracking pathetically. "We are your parents. We raised you. You have to reverse this financial transaction right now, or we will literally lose our entire house tomorrow morning. I smoothly pulled my arm out of his weak grasp, brushing my tailored suit jacket as if he had contaminated it. You lost your house the exact second you decided to secretly fund your fraudulent luxury lifestyle using my venture capital firm. I replied, my voice radiating pure, chilling indifference. I warned you 30 days ago, Dad. Your time is officially up. I turned my back on my weeping parents and proudly linked my arm through Malik. We confidently walked out of the Caldwell Enterprises headquarters together, leaving the entire toxic corporate empire burning to ashes behind us. The subsequent financial fallout was incredibly swift and absolutely merciless. By the very next morning, the devastating news dominated every single major media outlet across the entire city of Atlanta. Desmond was formally indicted on multiple federal charges of massive corporate embezzlement and severe tax evasion. He was sitting miserably in a cold federal holding cell, completely denied any option for bail. Valerie had foolishly attempted to flee the state, but the IRS had permanently frozen every single one of her hidden banking accounts. Her luxury boutique was aggressively raided by federal agents, and her expensive sports cars were publicly repossessed right off the street. The fake, flawless facade of our golden family completely violently shattered into jagged pieces. Without my secret financial backing, Winston and Beatrice were instantly served with immediate foreclosure notices. The bank legally seized their sprawling suburban mansion, forcing them to frantically pack their designer belongings into cheap cardboard boxes. I hired a private security team to discreetly monitor their movements, simply to ensure they did not attempt to approach Malik again. The security reports detailed the massive explosive arguments echoing from their empty house. Valerie screamed at Winston, blaming his terrible financial advice for her husband's federal arrest. Winston violently blamed Beatrice, claiming her endless obsessive shopping sprees had drained their accounts. Beatrice viciously turned on both of them, weeping hysterically about her ruined social reputation. The people who had spent my entire life crew teaming up to break my spirit were now aggressively tearing each other apart like starving wild animals. They had absolutely no loyalty to one another without the heavy glue of unearned wealth keeping their shallow relationships intact. Exactly 3 days after the corporate takeover, a massive, violent thunderstorm rolled through the city. I was sitting comfortably inside my secure, elegant townhouse, reviewing my latest investment portfolios when the front door intercom suddenly buzzed loudly. I pulled up the security camera feed on my silver tablet. My mother, Beatrice, was standing entirely alone in the pouring, freezing rain. Her expensive designer coat was completely soaked, and her perfectly styled hair was plastered messily against her pale face. She looked directly into the security camera lens, her face twisted into a mask of pure manufactured agony. "Naomi, please open the door," Beatrice sobbed loudly, her voice crackling through the external speaker system. "Please let your mother inside out of this terrible storm. I have absolutely nowhere else to go." I calmly walked to the front entryway and slowly opened the heavy wooden door, keeping the sturdy metal security chain firmly engaged. Beatrice immediately reached her wet, shaking hands through the narrow gap, desperately trying to grab my clothing. "Oh, my sweet, beautiful daughter," Beatrice cried out, forcing heavy fake tears to stream down her mascara-stained cheeks. "I am so deeply, incredibly sorry for absolutely everything. Whaley completely abandoned me today. The bank forcefully kicked me out of the house. We are flesh and blood, Naomi. We share the exact same heart. You are my precious little girl. Please do not let your own loving mother sleep out on the cold, dangerous streets tonight. I know you have a good, forgiving soul." I stared at her pathetic theatrical performance, feeling absolutely zero pity. My heart remained as cold and hard as a solid block of pure ice. "Blood did not matter to you when you abandoned me at the local hospital at 16 years old with a severely ruptured appendix," I replied, my voice slicing through the heavy pouring rain. "You deliberately left me completely alone in a terrifying emergency room just because you absolutely refused to miss Valerie's stupid high school cheerleading competition. Blood did not matter to you when you viciously mocked me for adopting a beautiful homeless child. Blood did not matter to you when you eagerly tried to sell my brilliant son to a ruthless monster just to secure a business investment for Desmond." Beatrice gasped, choking on her fake tears as her manipulative maternal facade completely failed. "But I am your mother," she whimpered weakly, grasping at the cold metal doorframe. "You do not actually want a daughter, Beatrice," I stated firmly, looking deep into her greedy, terrified eyes. You never wanted a daughter. You only want a convenient walking bank account to fund your sick obsession with fake social status. You made your toxic choices 14 years ago when you called me a massive family disappointment. Now you get to live with the harsh, permanent consequences. You have absolutely no power over me anymore. I forcefully pushed her wet hands away from the doorframe and slammed the heavy door completely shut, engaging 3 separate deadbolts. I walked away listening to her scream and wail into the stormy night until my private security team finally escorted her off my property forever. While my parents faced their long overdue absolute ruin, Xavier Caldwell was rapidly losing his mind. The disgraced billionaire had completely lost his entire massive fortune, his stellar public reputation, and his total corporate control in a matter of mere days. Federal investigators were actively circling his remaining shell companies, preparing to officially indict him for decades of illegal redlining and predatory fraud. Xavier realized his entire privileged life was effectively permanently over. He had absolutely nothing left to lose, making him an incredibly dangerous, desperate man. He blamed me and Malik for his catastrophic, spectacular downfall. The very next evening, Malik and I were working late inside the secure executive offices of Onyx Zenith Capital, finalizing the massive liquidation of the Caldwell corporate assets. Around midnight, we finally packed up our briefcases and took the private express elevator down to the VIP underground parking garage. The expansive concrete structure was eerily quiet and entirely empty. We walked confidently toward my armored luxury vehicle, casually discussing our dinner plans. Suddenly, a heavy black utility van aggressively screeched around the concrete corner, violently, blocking our only exit path. The loud, screeching tires echoed sharply against the cold concrete walls. The van doors aggressively slid open, and 4 massive towering mercenaries wearing dark tactical gear poured out. They moved with terrifying military precision, instantly surrounding Malik and me in a tight, hostile circle. They were heavily armed, and their faces were completely hidden behind dark masks. My heart slammed violently against my ribs, but I instantly stepped directly in front of Malik, using my own body as a physical human shield. I refused to let anyone touch my son. Xavier Caldwell slowly stepped out of the dark utility van. He looked completely deranged. His expensive suit was deeply wrinkled and disheveled. He clutched a heavy weapon tightly in his shaking hand, pointing it directly toward my chest. "You thought you could steal my entire global empire and effortlessly walk away," Xavier snarled, his voice echoing with terrifying, erratic fury. "You ruined my life, Naomi. The government is locking me in a cage. But I am not going down alone. I am taking my son back now, and you will bleed." I stared directly down the dark barrel, refusing to show any fear. "You lost Xavier," I stated. "Malik will never go with you." Xavier let out a psychotic laugh. He raised the weapon, aiming it at my face. "If I cannot have my heir, absolutely nobody can," he screamed, his finger tightening on the trigger. Suddenly, the garage flooded with flashing sirens. "Drop the weapon right now, Caldwell." 14 years ago, I took a starving 7-year-old boy off the streets. At his college graduation dinner, my wealthy family treated him like trash before a billionaire crashed the party to hand him the keys to a $12 million estate. The mogul claimed my son as his own and told him it was time to come home. My boy took those keys, turned to me, and delivered a response that made the billionaire choke on his own arrogance. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments down below. Hit the like button and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a toxic family who underestimated your worth. My name is Naomi. I am 35 years old and somehow still healing from wounds my family inflicted. As a successful software developer, I escaped their toxicity but maintained occasional contact. Growing up in the elite circles of Atlanta, my parents demanded absolute perfection. They paraded their black excellence while emotional coldness permeated every corner of our sprawling colonial home. I became the family scapegoat the exact moment I decided to adopt my wonderful little son Malik. I was only 21 when I found Malik wandering near a grocery store. Instead of marrying into a political dynasty like my parents planned, I chose to become a single mother to a child they deemed broken. They never forgave me for ruining their pristine image. Last Sunday, my family invited me to what they called an upscale graduation dinner at a private Buckhead country club. I assumed they finally wanted to celebrate Malik. He had just graduated as valedictorian from Morehouse College with a dual degree in finance and computer science. I was incredibly wrong about their intentions. We sat around a massive mahogany table covered in white silk and crystal glasses. My sister Valerie sat across from me wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her husband Desmond was next to her checking his luxury watch every 2 minutes. Between sips of expensive champagne, Valerie leaned forward and smirked. She reached into her designer purse, pulled out a wrinkled $100 bill, and slid it across the table toward me. "Take this and get your charity case a cheap ride home right now," she sneered, pointing a manicured finger at my son. "Desmond is hosting very important investors tonight," Valerie continued, her voice dripping with pure venom. "We do not need your street rat son ruining the aesthetic we are trying to project here. Pity goes a long way, but we have our limits." I simply sipped my sparkling water and smiled, keeping my composure completely intact. I did not flinch or raise my voice. I slowly slid the $100 bill back across the table. "Malik just graduated at the top of his class," I replied calmly. "He has every right to sit at this table and celebrate his massive achievements. The only thing ruining the aesthetic tonight is the fact that his real estate firm is 3 months behind on its mortgage," I added, watching Desmond suddenly turn extremely pale. Before Valerie could scream at me, the heavy wooden doors of the private dining room burst open. Xavier Caldwell, an infamous Atlanta billionaire and real estate mogul, strode into the room, surrounded by a massive security detail. My parents, Winston and Beatrice, immediately stood up and bowed their heads in a pathetic display of submission. Xavier completely ignored them and walked straight toward the beautiful chair where Malik was sitting. Xavier looked down at my son with a mixture of pure arrogance and possession. He reached into his tailored suit pocket and dropped a heavy set of solid gold keys directly onto the table in front of Malik. "A $12 million estate in Sandy Springs," he announced, his booming voice echoing through the silent room. "A $50 million trust fund is in your name. I have been watching you, boy. Graduating at the top of your class proves you are a true genius. It proves that the Caldwell bloodline flows strongly through your veins. You have shown potential. You have proven you are completely worthy of the Caldwell legacy." Xavier continued, staring at Malik. "Leave this pathetic woman who picked you out of the garbage and come home where you finally belong." "My mother." Beatrice suddenly grabbed my arm, her sharp nails digging deeply into my skin. "Keep your mouth shut, Naomi," she hissed in my ear. "Xavier is planning to invest $100 million into that failing company tonight. You ruined your life 14 years ago, picking up this unwanted stray instead of marrying that local senator like we told you to. Give the man his child back right now, or I swear you will regret it." My father Winston nodded vigorously in agreement. "Do not ruin this for us, Naomi," he whispered very harshly. "You have always been a massive disappointment, but today you can finally do something absolutely useful for your family. Just let the boy go." I looked at the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. They were completely willing to sell my son to a ruthless billionaire just to secure a business deal for my greedy brother-in-law. They viewed Malik not as a human being or their grandson, but as a convenient bargaining chip to save their sinking status. I turned my attention back to the table, refusing to let my family see me sweat. I had spent the last 14 years raising Malik, protecting him, loving him, and teaching him how to navigate a world that threw him away. I knew my son better than anyone else on this entire planet. The whole room held its collective breath, waiting to see what Malik would do next. Xavier stood tall and confident, expecting immediate obedience. Valerie smirked at me, clearly assuming that no young man could ever turn down a massive fortune and a spectacular mansion in Sandy Springs. Malik remained completely silent. His face was unreadable, a mask of pure calm that I had taught him to maintain during high-pressure situations. He slowly reached his hand out and picked up the gold keys from the silk tablecloth. The metal clinked loudly in the quiet room. Xavier grinned, a triumphant expression spreading across his face. My mother let out a loud sigh of deep relief while Desmond eagerly rubbed his hands together. They all thought the billionaire had won. They all thought Malik was just another greedy kid willing to abandon his mother for instant immense monetary wealth. But Malik did not stand up to hug his biological father. He did not say thank you to the man who abandoned him. Instead, my brilliant son turned his chair to face me, completely ignoring the billionaire hovering over him. "Mom," he said, his voice smooth and incredibly steady, "is this $12 million house enough to cover the first installment of the $50 million debt his shell company currently owes your venture capital firm?" The room fell so silent you could hear a single pin drop. His triumphant grin vanished instantly, replaced by sheer absolute confusion and terror. Valerie gasped loudly, dropping her expensive wine glass right onto her designer dress. "What are you talking about?" Xavier demanded, stepping back as if he had been physically struck. "You own a venture capital firm," my mother stammered, her tight grip on my arm completely loosening. "I thought you were just a freelance software developer working out of your basement." I stood up slowly, smoothing out my skirt. I pulled a sleek black leather folder from my bag and tossed it onto the table right next to the gold keys. The heavy folder landed with a satisfying thud that echoed. "I am a software developer." I explained, my voice radiating pure, unyielding authority. "I develop proprietary cybersecurity algorithms for Onyx Zenith Capital. It just so happens that I am also the founder and majority shareholder of that exact firm. And according to the documents in this folder, Onyx Zenith Capital is the primary debt holder of your overleveraged tech division." Mr. Caldwell Xavier stared at the folder, his face turning an unhealthy shade of pale. "You are the silent part." He whispered, his arrogance completely shattering into pieces. "You are the one who bought out my bad loans yesterday." "That is exactly right," I said, smiling warmly at my son, who was looking at me with immense pride. "I bought your debt because I always knew you would eventually try to crawl back into his life once Malik proved his true worth. You did not want a son savior. You just wanted a shiny new trophy to show off to your board of directors. But Malik is not a trophy, and he is not for sale." I looked around the room at my stunned family, and neither am I. "You messed with the completely wrong woman today, Mr. Caldwell. This is only the beginning of your financial ruin. I will dismantle everything you built because you threw him away like trash. Your entire empire belongs to the boy you abandoned. Goodbye. Now get out of our sight before I ruin you even more today. Right now, leave this place immediately, Mr. Caldwell. Drop the weapon right now, Caldwell." The armed private security team I hired moved in with precision. They disarmed the disgraced billionaire before he could blink, forcing him to the concrete floor. The flashing sirens were not the local police, but my elite tactical unit arriving on schedule to neutralize the threat. Xavier was placed under citizen's arrest for armed assault and kidnapping. As security personnel dragged him away, his furious screams echoed through the damp underground parking garage. I watched the pathetic man completely unravel, knowing that putting him in a federal prison cell was only the first step. True, absolute justice required profound public humiliation to permanently destroy the toxic legacy he and my treacherous family built. Exactly 2 weeks later, the highly anticipated Diamond Gala was held at the most exclusive convention center in downtown Atlanta. It was the absolute pinnacle of Black excellence, drawing wealthy philanthropists, powerful politicians, and elite corporate titans. I knew perfectly well that my desperate family would somehow find a way to sneak into the massive charity event. Valerie, Winston, and Beatrice had slithered past the front doors, hoping to secure a new wealthy benefactor to leech off of. They confidently sat at a prominent VIP table, attempting to project their old, unearned arrogance. They were loudly mocking me to the other guests, falsely claiming my venture capital firm was under a federal investigation. They desperately tried to maintain their fragile illusion of superiority, completely unaware that the entire gala was an intricate, meticulously designed trap. The elegant host of the evening stepped up to the grand podium, calling for the room to quiet down. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, his voice echoing across the silent ballroom, "tonight we have a special surprise. Please direct your attention to the main staircase to welcome our mysterious Titan benefactor. This incredible visionary just purchased the entire seized Caldwell estate in Sandy Springs and is generously donating the massive property to house homeless youth across Atlanta. Let us give a massive round of applause to our incredibly generous sponsors." A bright beaming spotlight instantly hit the grand marble staircase. I slowly walked down the illuminated steps, dripping in pure elegance, wearing a breathtaking custom emerald gown. Malik walked proudly right beside me in a sharp, perfectly tailored tuxedo, looking every bit the brilliant financial titan he had become. The entire ballroom erupted into deafening applause and standing ovations. At the VIP table below, Valerie stared up at us in sheer unadulterated horror. The expensive crystal champagne glass slipped right through her trembling fingers and shattered violently against the marble floor. Her mouth hung open as she realized the magnitude of her miscalculation. My parents, Winston and Beatrice, completely froze in their seats, their faces draining of all natural color as the harsh reality of their impending doom washed over them. I stepped onto the main stage and smoothly accepted the microphone from the host. I did not yell or show a single ounce of negative emotion. I stood there radiating terrifying, elegant composure as I surveyed the massive sea of elite faces. Thank you all for gathering here tonight. I began, my voice projecting crystal clearer authority across the massive ballroom. I am incredibly honored to stand before you today. Tonight, we are officially launching a new initiative that is deeply personal to my heart. I am extremely proud to announce the creation of the Malik Washington Foundation. The massive digital screens behind me instantly lit up, displaying the new foundation logo. The room erupted into another round of loud, supportive applause, but I held up my hand to quiet the wealthy audience. This specific foundation is not just another standard corporate charity. I explained, my gaze slowly panning across the room until it landed directly on the VIP table where my terrified family sat. I locked eyes with my mother Beatrice, who was shrinking in her velvet chair. This foundation is dedicated to protecting children who were violently thrown away by the people who were supposed to protect them. It is built to support the children who were deemed not good enough, not light enough, or not perfect enough to fit into a highly toxic family aesthetic. I watched Valerie squirm uncomfortably under the spotlight of my words. I took a slow, deliberate step closer to the edge of the stage, ensuring every single word pierced their shallow souls. For too many decades in this city, certain powerful families have hidden their deep emotional abuse behind the flawless facade of generational wealth and manufactured excellence. They built their towering glass empires on profound deception, greed, and the ruthless abandonment of vulnerable, innocent children. But those dark days are officially over. We are actively reclaiming our power today. I am standing here to completely dismantle the toxic systems that allow wealthy predators and cowardly enablers to thrive without consequences. Winston desperately tried to hide his face behind his cloth napkin, completely humiliated by the targeted speech. The prominent guests sitting at their table began to shift away from them. Sensing the heavy directed tension, I turned greatly and handed the microphone directly to my brilliant son. Malik took it with absolute steady confidence. Stepping into the bright spotlight, he looked out at the massive crowd and then focused his sharp, intelligent eyes squarely on my brother-in-law Desmond's empty chair. "Good evening, everyone," Malik said, his deep voice carrying undeniable corporate authority. As the newly appointed executive director of the Malik Washington Foundation, I have a major financial update to share with you tonight. Today, Onyx Zenith Capital officially acquired the entirety of the remaining financial assets belonging to the disgraced Caldwell Corporation. The audience let out a collective gasp of sheer shock. The massive scale of the corporate acquisition was absolutely staggering news to the elite crowd. Furthermore, Malik continued, raising his voice slightly to command the room. "We have also fully acquired all the outstanding debts belonging to the Sterling real estate firm. We are aggressively restructuring their entire portfolio effective immediately." Valerie let out a loud choked sob, covering her face with her trembling hands. She knew exactly what that restructuring meant. It meant absolute permanent financial annihilation. Malik smiled warmly at the crowd. "The sprawling Caldwell estate will serve as our primary headquarters, providing safe housing and educational resources for abandoned youth across the state. We are transforming their dark criminal legacy into a bright beacon of hope. Thank you." The entire ballroom gave Malik a massive standing ovation. I proudly linked my arm through his, soaking in the beautiful, victorious moment. But the absolute best part of the evening was still yet to come. As the thunderous applause slowly began to die down, a highly coordinated team of large, muscular security guards purposefully approached the VIP table where my treacherous family sat. The sharp head of the private security detail leaned down directly over my father's shoulder. His loud voice was intentionally projected loud enough for the surrounding tables of elite guests to hear clearly. "Excuse me, sir," the large security chief stated firmly. "The primary credit cards you use to reserve these exclusive entrance tickets have just been forcefully declined by your banking institution. The transactions have been officially flagged as fraudulent. You no longer have any valid authorization to be inside this private building. You and your family are currently trespassing at a private corporate event. I must ask you to vacate the premises immediately before I involve the local authorities." Beatrice gasped, clutching her pearl necklace in sheer panic. "This is a mistake." Beatrice shrieked frantically, trying to salvage her shattered dignity in front of her wealthy peers. "We are prominent VIP guests. We belong here. We are the distinguished parents of the woman standing right up there on the stage. You cannot throw us out into the street." The security chief did not blink. I have direct orders from the primary sponsor of this event. Ma'am, you need to gather your belongings and walk toward the exit right now. Valerie desperately tried to grab the arm of a politician sitting at the adjacent VIP table, but he pulled away, looking at her with absolute disgust. The harsh reality of their complete financial destruction was finally crashing down upon them. They had nowhere left to hide and nobody left to manipulate. Winston violently shoved his chair backward, his face turning a deep shade of crimson red. He pointed a shaking, angry finger directly up at the brightly lit stage. "You cannot do this to us." Naomi Winston screamed, his desperate voice echoing loudly through the silent ballroom. "We are your family. You are completely destroying our lives today. You owe us respect and loyalty right now." I looked down from the elevated stage, staring coldly at the pathetic, broken man who had maliciously tormented me for my entire existence. The entire massive room waited in dead, absolute silence for my ultimate, devastating response tonight. "No, Winston," I replied, my voice perfectly level and completely devoid of any remaining emotion. "You are not my family. You are just a terrible investment that I finally decided to permanently write off today." I gave a subtle but firm nod to the head of my private security detail. The massive guards immediately stepped forward and firmly grabbed my father by his expensive tuxedo jacket. They hoisted him out of his velvet chair with effortless military precision, completely ignoring his loud, indignant protests. Beatrice began to wail loudly, thrashing her arms wildly as two other security personnel flanked her and physically lifted her off the carpet. Valerie tried to run toward the exit to avoid the sheer public humiliation, but a female security officer swiftly blocked her path and securely gripped her elbow, forcing her to walk slowly. The elite society of Atlanta, the very people my toxic family had spent their entire lives desperately trying to impress, watched in absolute stunned silence. Nobody stepped forward to help them. Nobody offered a single word of sympathy or comfort. The high-profile politicians, the wealthy real estate developers, and the prominent corporate investors simply stared with cold, calculating eyes as the fake Golden family was forcefully marched out of the grand ballroom. Their carefully manufactured social standing was completely violently obliterated in a matter of seconds. The heavy mahogany doors slammed shut behind them, severing their connection to the world of immense wealth forever. They were banished, miles away from the glittering charity gala. Xavier Caldwell sat alone in a stark, freezing cold federal holding cell. He wore a bright orange, unglamorous jumpsuit that stripped away every ounce of his intimidating billionaire persona. He sat hunched on a thin, uncomfortable mattress, staring blankly at a small static fill television mounted high on the concrete wall. The local late-night news was broadcasting a live feed from outside the convention center. Xavier watched the bright screen as reporters excitedly announced the massive corporate restructuring of Caldwell Enterprises by the new majority owner, Onyx Zenith Capital. The camera zoomed in on a high-resolution photograph of my brilliant son, Malik, standing victoriously on the gala stage. Xavier stared at the young, handsome face of the genius he had viciously thrown out of a moving car 14 years ago. The crushing weight of profound psychological defeat finally broke the ruthless mogul. He realized with absolute horrifying clarity that he had spent his entire adult life aggressively building a corrupt global empire through illegal evictions and predatory fraud, only to have it completely legally absorbed by the very child he deemed worthless. His entire legacy was permanently erased. The Caldwell name would no longer be associated with towering glass skyscrapers and immense wealth. It would only be remembered as a massive criminal enterprise that was ultimately conquered by a brilliant 21-year-old boy. Xavier buried his face in his hands, weeping silently into the dark, empty cell, knowing he would likely spend the rest of his natural life trapped behind cold steel bars. He had absolutely nothing left. The destruction of my enemies did not stop with Xavier. The treacherous bond between my sister Valerie and her corrupt husband Desmond completely shattered under the intense pressure of federal prosecution. Desmond was sitting miserably in a stark interrogation room surrounded by aggressive federal agents and forensic accountants. Facing decades in a maximum security penitentiary for massive corporate embezzlement and severe tax evasion, the cowardly man frantically decided to save himself. Desmond officially turned state's evidence and aggressively testified against his own wife without a second thought. He provided the ruthless federal prosecutors with detailed internal documents proving that Valerie was the actual mastermind behind the complex tax evasion scheme regarding her luxury boutique. He eagerly threw the golden child directly under the bus, offering up her hidden offshore accounts and falsified tax returns in exchange for a significantly reduced prison sentence. When the federal authorities formally indicted Valerie, she completely lost her mind. She desperately tried to call our parents for emergency financial help, but their phone lines were already disconnected. Her expensive designer wardrobe was seized, her luxury vehicles were auctioned off, and she was forced to rely on an overworked public defender. The golden child, who had spent her entire life maliciously mocking my struggles, was now facing serious mandatory prison time and absolute total financial ruin. The shallow, toxic marriage built entirely on unearned wealth and mutual greed violently collapsed, leaving them both permanently destroyed and facing years behind thick iron bars. My parents, Winston and Beatrice, faced their own unique form of poetic justice. After the bank legally foreclosed on their sprawling suburban mansion, they were immediately violently thrust into the harsh reality of severe poverty. Without my secret financial backing, masking their massive debts, they had absolutely zero resources left. They were forcefully evicted and had to hastily pack whatever cheap belongings they could carry into large plastic trash bags. With their credit scores entirely ruined and their social reputation completely burned to ashes, nobody in Atlanta would rent them a decent home. They were ultimately forced to move into a tiny, run-down one-bedroom apartment on the dangerous outskirts of the city. Ironically, it was the exact same crumbling apartment complex where I had lived 14 years ago when I first adopted Malik. It was the exact same dangerous building where I had struggled to afford basic groceries while they willfully ignored my desperate pleas for temporary financial assistance. Now they were the ones shivering in the cold, damp apartment, eating cheap canned food, and hiding from aggressive debt collectors. Winston blamed Beatrice for her endless shopping addictions, and Beatrice viciously blamed Winston for his terrible business investments. They spent their miserable days aggressively screaming at each other, trapped in a tiny box of their own terrible making, entirely stripped of the fake luxury they valued above everything else in their empty lives. They finally had to face each other. The most surprising part of my ultimate victory was the profound sense of quiet peace that slowly washed over me in the following weeks. I did not drive down to their crumbling apartment complex to gloat about my massive success. I did not send them mocking letters or post triumphant photos on social media for them to see. I did not waste another single ounce of my valuable energy thinking about their pathetic, miserable lives. I finally deeply understood a fundamental truth that my extensive therapy had been trying to teach me for years. The true opposite of love is not burning hate or aggressive vengeance. The true, absolute opposite of love is total, pure indifference. They were completely erased from my mind and my heart. The heavy, toxic weight of constantly trying to earn their impossible approval was permanently lifted off my shoulders. I was incredibly free at last. I stood on the expansive open-air balcony of the convention center, looking out over the beautiful, glowing skyline of Atlanta. The cool night breeze felt incredibly refreshing against my skin. The loud celebratory music from the charity gala drifted softly through the open glass doors behind me. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sweet, undeniable taste of absolute victory and personal freedom. Malik stepped out onto the quiet balcony, holding 2 crystal glasses of sparkling apple cider. He walked over to me, his face radiating pure happiness and deep, unwavering respect. "Mom," he said, his voice gentle, but carrying immense weight. "I have something very important. I need to show you right now tonight." He carefully set the 2 crystal glasses down onto the small marble table resting near the edge of the balcony. He then reached inside the breast pocket of his impeccably tailored tuxedo jacket and slowly pulled out a crisply folded legal document. The thick white paper was heavily stamped with the official raised seal of the Superior Court of Atlanta. I looked at the complicated legal document, feeling a sudden wave of curious anticipation washing over my entire body. I had spent so much time aggressively fighting to completely secure our future that I had not paused to consider what specific moves he might be making behind the scenes. Malik gently unfolded the thick document and handed it directly to me under the warm glow of the elegant string lights illuminating the spacious balcony. I looked down at the paper and began to read the official text printed across the page. My eyes scanned the complex legal jargon until I finally reached the bottom section where the judge's official signature rested securely. I read the final paragraph again, completely stunned by what I was seeing. The document officially verified that Malik had legally permanently altered his name today. He deliberately chose to drop the Caldwell name entirely forever, ensuring that toxic legacy died. He confidently and permanently chose his bright, promising future over their very dark, miserable past. I stared down at the crisp, white legal document resting in my trembling hands, reading the freshly printed ink over and over again until the words finally fully registered in my mind. The official state seal of Georgia gleamed under the soft, ambient light of the convention center balcony. Malik had not just rejected Xavier Caldwell's massive fortune and his manipulative offers of corporate power. My son had taken the ultimate, irreversible legal step to completely sever any lingering ties to the biological monster who had callously thrown him away. The heavy official court decree legally finalized his permanent name change. He was no longer just a boy carrying the hidden, invisible weight of a billionaire father's shameful secret. He had forcefully dropped the Caldwell surname, entirely refusing to ever be associated with a lineage built on systematic exploitation and profound cruelty. Instead, the document clearly declared his new legal identity to the entire world. He was officially Malik Washington, now proudly taking my chosen surname. He had legally bound himself to the woman who actually raised him, choosing the deep, authentic love we shared over a cold, empty billionaire legacy. I looked up from the heavy legal paper, my vision slightly blurred by the sudden, overwhelming rush of raw, powerful emotion. Malik stood before me, radiating an incredible, profound strength that took my breath away. He reached out and gently placed his warm, strong hands over my trembling fingers. He offered me a $12 million house, Malik said, his deep voice carrying a beautiful, unwavering clarity that echoed into the cool Atlanta night. He thought he could just buy my loyalty after leaving me to freeze on the streets. But you gave me a real home when I was literally sleeping on hard concrete. You sacrificed your own youth and worked grueling, impossible hours just to make sure I was safe and warm. You built an entire financial empire from absolutely nothing, so I would never have to be hungry or terrified ever again. I do not want his solid gold keys, Mom. I do not want any part of his corrupt, broken kingdom. I just want to stand right by your side and continue building our kingdom together. The heavy, invisible armor I had worn for the past 14 years finally completely shattered in that exact beautiful moment. A single warm tear slipped down my cheek, followed rapidly by another. But for the very first time in my entire adult life, I was not crying from the agonizing pain of rejection or the bitter sting of familial betrayal. These were tears of absolute profound peace. As I looked at the incredible, brilliant young man standing in front of me, I experienced a massive sudden realization. Every single ruthless, calculated move I made over the past few weeks was never truly about destroying my toxic parents or punishing my cruel sister. It was not even about completely dismantling Xavier Caldwell's corrupt global empire. The intricate, deeply strategic revenge I executed was entirely about protecting the beautiful chosen family I had painstakingly created from scratch. I destroyed their toxic world simply because they threatened to destroy the only pure, beautiful thing I had ever loved. I gently folded the heavy court document and safely tucked it inside my emerald evening gown pocket, keeping it close to my racing heart. I reached out and picked up my crystal glass of sparkling apple cider from the small marble table. Malik smiled warmly, picking up his own glass to join me. We stood together on the expansive open-air balcony, looking out over the glittering, majestic skyline of downtown Atlanta. The towering glass skyscrapers and massive corporate buildings stretched out before us like a vast illuminated kingdom waiting to be conquered. We were no longer the terrified 1-year-old single mother and the starving abandoned 7-year-old boy desperately fighting just to survive another cold, harsh night in a rundown apartment complex. We had weathered the absolute worst storms imaginable and emerged completely victorious. I raised my elegant crystal glass high into the incredibly cool and deeply refreshing night air. To Malik Washington, I said, my voice ringing loudly with immense, undeniable pride and profound, deep, unconditional love. To the exceptionally brilliant young man who successfully proved that true intrinsic worth is built entirely through strong character and resilience, not simply inherited through highly toxic, corrupt bloodlines. Malik proudly raised his crystal glass to firmly meet mine, his dark brown eyes shining radiantly with absolute pure joy and incredibly fierce, unwavering determination. To Naomi Washington, he replied, his voice remarkably smooth and incredibly steady. To the exceptionally fierce and totally unstoppable woman who patiently taught me exactly how to fight, how to win, and how to truly love to our powerful brand new legacy. The delicate crystal glasses clinked kegged together, producing a sharp, clear, musical chime that beautifully resonated across the quiet balcony. We took a slow, satisfying sip of the sweet, sparkling cider, savoring the absolute perfection of the victorious moment. The loud, energetic music from the massive charity gala continued drifting softly through the open glass doors behind us, inviting us back into the vibrant celebration. I offered my arm to my brilliant son, and he proudly linked his arm through mine. We turned away from the balcony railing, leaving the dark shadows of the night entirely behind us. We confidently walked back through the heavy glass doors, stepping directly into the bright, brilliant light of the grand ballroom. We did not walk back inside as a victim and an orphan. We entered the massive room as the two most powerful self-made titans in the entire city of Atlanta. The crowded ballroom instantly parted for us, the elite guests looking at us with deep, newfound reverence and absolute awe. The dark, miserable, toxic past was finally officially dead and buried forever. Our bright, unstoppable, beautiful new legacy had officially triumphantly begun.